IVM.
I want to thank Intel for supporting our show. Do you remember last year when we spoke about how the Intel vPro platform is built for business? Well, I'm glad to say we've kicked it up a notch. That's right, Intel is back with a new and improved version of the platform. The new Intel vPro platform lets you do more of what you want and less of what you don't. So it's better for you and for your IT teams, who really are the backbone of keeping your work-from-home experience easy and enjoyable. I can safely say that the new vPro platform gives you more enterprise efficiency with less constraints. Visit intel.in/morewithvpro, that's VPRO, to discover how you can get more done with less waiting. If you're listening on the IVM Podcast Android app, click the link that's visible to you now.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. At the time of this recording, something like 322,000 Indians are confirmed cases of COVID-19, and we don't know how many more are unconfirmed and so on. While there's been a lot of attention on potential vaccines for this disease, and we've also talked about that in a previous episode, we'll provide you a link to that. Today, we want to focus on what the potential treatments are. And to discuss that, I have with me today Sunila and Shambhavi. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Everyone.
Okay, Sunila, I want to first start with you. WHO is conducting these so-called solidarity trials, right?
Right.
What are these and what are the treatments they're looking at?
So the Solidarity Trial is an international clinical trial to help find an effective treatment for COVID-19, which is headed by the World Health Organization and its partners. The trial will compare 4 treatment options against standard of care to assess their relative effectiveness against COVID-19. By enrolling patients in multiple countries, the trial aims to rapidly discover whether any of the drugs slow disease progression or improve survival, and other drugs can be added based on the emerging evidence. Currently, over 400 hospitals in 35 countries are actively recruiting patients, and nearly 3,500 patients have been enrolled from 17 countries. Overall, over 100 countries have joined or expressed an interest in joining the trial, and WHO is actively supporting 60 of them. India is one of those countries where the trial is being carried out. Currently, 4 hospitals in Jodhpur, Ahmedabad, Chennai, and Bhopal have received regulatory approvals, and more will follow. So currently, the trial is considering 4 drugs for the COVID-19 treatment, namely hydroxychloroquine, lopinavir-ritonavir with combination of interferon beta-1a and remdesivir.
One of these drugs, of course, that you mentioned, Sunila, is hydroxychloroquine. And according to the President of the United States, there's no downside from taking it. But Shambhavi, this drug has been involved in some controversy. The study of the drug and its efficacy has been retracted. What's the story behind it?
Right. So hydroxychloroquine has basically been in use for a long time, not against COVID-19, but for a number of other diseases. And I think the number of people suffering from lupus take it, and also for malarial treatments. So when it came to COVID-19, there was obviously a lot of speculation first on whether hydroxychloroquine will actually work or not. And the way a lot of this has been happening is that people all over the world are doing research in labs. And once that research has been peer-reviewed and published, it's actually, and if it's significant enough, then people are taking it up for trials. With hydroxychloroquine, there have been a number of research publications, some which say that it will work, some which say that it won't work, or it might also have other impacts. It's also about how it will work. So, for example, the ICMR has put out an advisory saying that we should be giving hydroxychloroquine to our healthcare workers or frontline workers now as a prophylactic. So, it is before you actually get COVID-19. And the idea is that it will reduce your chances of actually getting the disease. The paper which was published in The Lancet, which was eventually retracted, like you said, was looking at HCQ as a treatment after you have got COVID-19. So there's a primary difference between the way those two research outputs were actually structured. With the Lancet paper, there was a lot of controversy. It had looked at data. I think it was created impact because it looked at data from a very large number of people. There was a company in the US called Stugisphere, or Sugisphere, I can't remember the name, but they actually provided data. It's a health analytics company run by an Indian American. They access data from a large number of healthcare units and provided the data that eventually went into the paper. After the paper was published, a lot of questions were asked about the data, and at this point of time, the parent company refused to give the data for independent verification of the authenticity of the data they were looking at. And then subsequently, the researchers said that because we could not actually access the primary data, we are not sure about the validity of our findings, and therefore we retract the paper. So this was a paper that said that HCQ might not actually be useful for COVID-19, but could instead cause arrhythmias and other sort of health problems, heart problems, if it was given for COVID-19 patients. Obviously, once that paper came out, HCQ was for some time suspended from the Solidarity trials by the WHO. The ICMR wrote to the WHO saying that there were problems with the Lancet paper, and that our own work was showing that there was at least some kind of prophylactic advantage. Subsequent to that, the ICMR came out with their own paper, which kind of showed that there was prophylactic advantage. The only problem that critics have come up with this arrangement is that ICMR published their paper in their own journal. So it did not go to an independent journal, as say. And there was no conflict of interest that was indicated. And this has happened again and again. So even with, there was another paper that came out from the DG Health Services Department, which was also published in some predatory journal of the own institution. Again, no conflict of interest said. So there was one problem. And the other was that the paper came out after the advisory came out. And technically what we would like to see is the research done first and then the advisory based on a complete research set and the analysis being done and peer reviewed, etc., etc. So that did not happen. There is some evidence that HCQ might be useful, at least in certain context. But I think defining the context is what is really important. And that is something that we have not done very correctly. For example, like you said, President Trump came out very early on and said that HCQ is a miracle drug and it's going to be, they call it the Trump drug, right? And what we saw subsequent to that was people started taking it without actually taking a doctor's advice. There was someone in the US who used HCQ, which they got for clearing their koi ponds, so the fish ponds. And since they heard it on TV that, hey, HCQ could prevent from COVID-19, this guy took it and died of it. There was a case of a doctor in Kolkata, I think, who decided to take HCQ, developed heart problems and passed away. So the context definition is extremely important, and that is something that we are not able to articulate very well so far. And again, it's not a question of, hey, if it is preventive, why can I not just take it? It's just that once you take the drug, there's somebody else who actually needs the drug, maybe the malaria patients or the lupus patients, and you're taking it away from him. So there's a lot of context setting that needs to be done.
So obviously hoarding will remain a problem even if supplies of the drug increase, so long as people just buy the drug and keep it with themselves, just in case it does create a supply problem.
Yeah.
But Sunila, I want to come back to you about the other three treatments. Right. Those are all different from hydroxychloroquine. Those are antivirals. Can you tell us how they work?
Yes. So remdesivir and lopinavir ritonavir, they are basically drugs used for treating HIV. So how these drugs work are they help in reducing the viral load of the HIV in body and and gradually protect the immune system. So as these are antiviral drugs, they are being used to treat coronavirus disease as well. Remdesivir is developed by American biopharmaceutical company called Gilead Sciences. It is a broad spectrum antiviral which was previously tested in humans with Ebola virus disease and which has also shown promise as a drug against MERS and SARS, both of which are caused by coronaviruses. Doctors say that remdesivir, if used correctly, can help lower the recovery period from 15 days to just first 4 days. It is an antiviral drug which works by copying the coronavirus's genetic makeup and slows down its replication. And a trial funded by the US National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases has found in the preliminary results significant positives to the use of remdesivir in patients requiring oxygen therapy. The drug was found to speed up recovery during a trial, and the results were encouraging enough to warrant publication of the results even while the trial was still on. So the trials are still going on, and the drug has not received official go ahead for the treatment because the trials are still going on. Gilead Sciences is also working on other clinical trials in collaboration with Roche to evaluate the safety and efficacy of remdesivir in combination with tocilizumab, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, compared to remdesivir plus placebo in patients with severe COVID-19 pneumonia. So the results are still awaited of these clinical trials. And next drug is lopinavir ritonavir. So it is a combination drug which is used with other medications to treat HIV infection. So they belong to a class of medications called protease inhibitors. They work by decreasing the amount of HIV in the blood. Now, a random clinical trial was conducted in China on lopinavir ritonavir for COVID-19 treatment. So the study was conducted on 199 patients, and it showed that there was no significant benefit observed in the patients who were administered with the drug. So it is still contentious whether the drug is really useful or not, and hopefully the trials will reveal some more information on that. The last treatment option is lopinavir ritonavir in combination with interferon beta 1A. Interferons are a group of signaling proteins made and released by host cells in response to the presence of several viruses. So essentially, a virus-infected cell will release interferons, causing nearby cells to heighten their antiviral defenses. So these interferons will be combined with the combination drug and administered to the patients. But currently, there is very little information available on what are the results of this treatment. The trials are still going on, but no results have been revealed as of now.
Okay. So now all of these treatments that we've just discussed are basically medicines that were designed to address other illnesses, right? So even remdesivir was originally designed for Ebola, in keeping Ebola in mind, or the other antivirals were designed around HIV. Hydroxychloroquine was originally a drug that was used to address malaria, and now also lupus and some other autoimmune conditions. Are there any purpose-built treatments that are in progress currently?
So because this is a novel virus, I think we're still trying to figure out and learn a lot about the virus and where we can actually attack it through medications. The one thing that we obviously tried to do is use plasma therapy, which basically means that if we have a patient who's suffering from the disease and is getting better, you can use their plasma, which are the antibodies that their body has generated against COVID-19, and these can be transplanted into someone who is now starting to develop totals to help their body actually mount an immune response against COVID-19. So this plasma therapy thing has been going on for a while. I think China first tried it in their initial spate of infections itself. And I think other countries are also now picking it up. I think Sunila was saying about how India has also started a trial on this, right, Sunila?
Yes, so ICMR has already started trials for plasma therapy, and Maharashtra is conducting the world's largest trial. So Nagpur's Government Medical College and Hospital will be leading this trial to assess the efficacy. And according to the reports, more than 500 patients in Maharashtra will be given blood plasma obtained from recovered patients. Currently, it has 238 patients on board from 23 hospitals across the state.
Right, so that is one thing that I think we're trying new. The other is some brand new research which was published last month in Nature about the creation of monoclonal antibodies against COVID-19. So very similar to what happens for plasma therapy and what routinely happens in our body when we have an infection either from a virus, is that our body creates antibodies against it. Now, since we can study the structure of the virus in the lab, we can also design antibodies that will go and bind to the virus and can either stop it from actually attaching to a human cell, or it will cause the viral particles to aggregate so that they don't actually enter a human cell. So these are called monoclonal antibodies. There's some very promising research that is coming out from a couple of startups as well as from publicly funded research that shows that monoclonal antibodies work. Monoclonal antibodies for other diseases are known to work. So, for example, we have this when we had the Nipah incident in 2018, we got monoclonal antibodies from Australia against the Hendra virus. So we do have those kind of avenues. So we do know how a monoclonal antibody works, what kind of trials we need to do. So that is promising research. I think one of the major challenges to develop drugs or treatments of various sorts is just the sheer scale and rapidity at which they need to be developed. Our bureaucratic systems are not really geared up to approve of new drugs very quickly. And obviously, we need that kind of a system to make sure that there's no complacency in the kind of drugs that are actually approved for commercial use. But that kind of bureaucracy is now also holding a shot on making sure that the medications are available at a quicker rate. It's a trade-off that we'll have to balance and figure out the best way forward. That's, I think, where solidarity trials kind of step in because individual countries might not have the resources or might not have enough manpower to actually cater and develop clinical trials of that rate. So it makes sense for something like the WHO to coordinate those efforts. I think we are getting there. It will just take a little bit more time to actually approve a drug that will work. And again, as I have continuously said throughout this podcast, it's going to be very important to think of the context in which we are going to be giving these drugs.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by context?
So whether it's given as a prophylactic, whether it is going to be given as a mild symptomatic person, whether it's going to be given to someone who has very severe symptoms, is on the ventilator, or has been intubated. There's a lot of the clinical management for these conditions is different.
The new COVID-19 management protocol that has been released by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, doesn't it set the context for the various types of drugs?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So there are these various scenarios under which you'll have various forms of clinical management, and it's very important that any trials that we do actually account for under which context a particular drug is being approved of. So we cannot be comparing something that was approved for a mild symptomatic or a prophylactic use with something for the severe thing. That's kind of what we need to. So when we communicate the trial results, we have to communicate them very clearly. Also, there's a difference between a peer-reviewed and a preprint, because peer review takes a lot of time. A lot of researchers are now putting out their journal articles as preprint articles, so that they are not peer-reviewed, but just that the research is completely done. And often we see journalists or other media outlets picking up on those and putting across the news that, hey, is this the new cure? We've seen this happen a lot in cancer, which is a field where I did my PhD in. We seem to have a cancer cure every half a month, saying that, hey, this is going to be it. But it hasn't happened yet, because obviously what the kind of research that goes into publications has to then be validated. It has to work in humans. It should be safe, etc., etc. So there are a lot of other parameters that we have to think about before actually putting a drug into a human being. And it's very essential that while scientists and doctors are working on the drugs, that we try to keep patients and ensure that we do everything we can to be safe in the COVID times, and not just entirely rely on this miracle drug to turn up.
Thank you. That is much needed and sobering. Obviously, that when you have a new illness like COVID-19, coming up with a brand new drug for it is something of an ask. And even when we're using existing treatments and repurposing them for this disease, it's always more complicated than it might seem on the surface. Obviously, as you pointed out, there's a trade-off between speed and efficacy. And these are things that are very hard for a government like India to do. It's not really set up for it. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Shambhavi, connected to this topic, which we're going to keep addressing on All Things Policy, we do have a course, right, that is connected to this broader field.
Right. So we have a brand new course at Takshashila as the Graduate Certificate in Public Policy with a specialization in biotech policy. So this is meant to understand how the biotechnology and most of the public health policy space in India looks like, to try and figure out how we can improve on things. This is meant to, so you don't need to have a biotechnology background per se, but you are welcome if you already are working in the life sciences space in India or abroad. And the course is designed to basically teach the fundamentals of public policy and economics, and then apply them to specific case studies derived from both biotechnology and public health. So the course starts on 27th of June. The applications are currently open. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write to us. There are the websites. The details are available on our website as well.
And on that note, thank you so much again, Sunila and Shambhavi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya.
And thank you for joining us on All Things Policy.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. We appreciate their support. It's been a really fun week, guys. We've had some great episodes on your old favorites. Cyrus Says, Advertising is Dead, Edges and Sledges, Football Shitball had a really fun episode as well. Definitely do check it out. I'm sure you're going to enjoy yourselves. And thanks for listening, and we hope to catch you again next week.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.